Hello, everybody.
There we go.
Hello.
Hello. We hear you.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh. So let's see, a couple of housekeeping things. I imagine everybody knows where the restrooms are, but there they are. Right over there. And also, when your plates are needing to be scraped, there's a green bucket over on the end of this little cement area, and you can scrape into there, and then you can rinse them if you want to. There is a box here for recycling the cans. Maybe we'll put that over with the waste. But the box is for recycling, but it'll go over there. So all the throwing away stuff goes right there. And if you need anything else, just ask Celeste. She knows everything. So, and now I'm wanting to find Daniel Williford. There he is. Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Williford. I know a lot of faces here in the crowd. I was here at Cowell for about 10 years as the lead interpreter, and it was there that I got a chance to meet Fred. And I remember when I first arrived here at Cowell, docents were, saying, "Oh gosh, welcome aboard. Oh, wait till you meet Fred. Just wait till you meet Fred. You have a question, ask Fred. He'll know about that." And they were right. I met Fred, probably within a couple of weeks of being here. And Fred became one of my best friends. We hung out a lot. We had a great naturalist relationship where no matter where I was in the world, I remember Ashley and I took a year in Spain, and there were these native California trees planted all in the town that we were in. I knew they were from California. I couldn't figure out what they were, and Fred was my first go-to, across the world. He was the person that I went to talk about these things. And I know I share that with a lot of people here. Fred was like the naturalist's naturalist. I often called him the sage of the San Lorenzo, because this was his place. And in talking with Sanda just a moment ago, she said, this is Fred's, final social gathering. And Fred would be stoked to see all these wonderful people here smiling and honoring him. He'd probably be very humbled by this whole thing. But gosh, you're here because Fred touched your life in a great way. Fred was fun, that glint in his eye that we all know about. Maybe it got us into trouble, maybe it didn't, but it was always wonderful. And so personally, I felt like I lost a really close, great friend. And, I know we all feel the sadness of losing Fred. He was a big part of our community, of our lives. And with that, one thing that I want to honor Fred with is his contributions to this place right here, where we are standing and sitting. Some of you have taken a look over at the pictures over there and the news articles and know that this was, one of the ideas that this was going to be some tent cabins down here, right along the river. Probably not the best placement of these things, and Fred, among other people in this group, made sure that that didn't happen. That we could be in this place as a picnic ground, and preserve it this way. And it didn't stop there. Fred helped so much around here. In fact, before I lose my train of thought, I just want to point out that sycamore tree that has fallen over there. The day that fell, I called Fred and said, "You're not going to believe it. One of the sycamores has fallen." And Fred was here, like within, an hour or so, measuring it, talking about it, saying, "We have to have an interp sign here to talk about the importance of all of this and the sycamores." And, it just was that kind of relationship that was just so fun and so wonderful. So I look at that and I see Fred. And actually, all around, I see Fred. And getting, kind of back to his contributions to this place, you walk into the visitor center. You walk towards the back big window, and there's a steelhead trout exhibit there. And we raise trout there for 2 months of the year, but we had this big kind of hole in the exhibit for 10 months of the year wasn't showing trout being raised. So we made a video, and Fred was our mastermind behind that video. And you can go and watch that video and know that he played a major role. And then that went on to, gosh, Eye of the Flycatcher, the Natural Wonders of Henry Cowell Redwoods, the Fall Creek videos, my goodness. Raise your hand if you had a chance to see these documentaries. Then you know, they're awesome. And they just expanded, the way that people looked at this park. And I still have in my mind the great blue heron gobbling down the ground squirrel, in the meadow. And that was amazing. So Fred was there to capture all that and share it. And so as a volunteer for the park, Fred is being honored. I'm sorry. Go back over here. The highest honor that state parks can give to a volunteer is being given to Fred today. And we're going to be giving it to Roberta. This is the Superior Achievement Award. And it's really awesome. This is like something that goes all the way up to the state park director for approval. And Elizabeth Hammock is here in the group, and she helped push this along up the chain so it could get signed. And I had the honor of being able to write the justification of why Fred deserves this. And I stopped at about, 3/4 of a page, but I could have gone longer. I thought this is probably enough. They probably got enough. But so this, is just kind of a memento of what Fred accomplished here and his legacy. And it's, it's just spectacular. Gosh. Just to wrap things up, I'm saddened by the loss of a friend, but I'm so happy that I got a chance to spend so much quality time with such a high quality individual. Fred, boy, what a fantastic, fantastic person. And, I sure will. It says for more than 14 years, Fred was an exceptional docent at Henry Cowell Redwood State Park. He inspired many through his passion for education, extensive scientific knowledge, dedication to the native plant garden, and so much more. He leaves behind an everlasting legacy, and his many contributions will continue to enrich the docent program and the visitor's experience for years to come. Fred McPherson was an outstanding ambassador for California State Parks, demonstrating the true spirit of volunteerism. California State Parks extends its heartfelt gratitude. So, there we go. And one thing, if you walk over to the native plant garden in front of the nature store, that is a place where we met just about once a month, Fred and I and a group of wonderful docents, to take care of that native plant garden. Well, now the bench there has a plaque that's in honor of Fred. And keep your eyes open. It's probably died back a little bit, but Fred donated a lot of plants to the native plant garden. But one in particular, the Solomon seal, has been doing great ever since it went into the ground. And this year it exploded with new leaves and flowers. And every time I looked at it, just the thoughts of Fred just washed over me. So get to that native plant garden and, have a moment there, whenever it's right for you, and have that moment to, connect with Fred there. And with that, thank you, everyone. All right. Nancy Macy, you're on. You're welcome. All right. There you go.
He got through it without crying. I cannot make any guarantees.
When I wrote it,
It really is an honor to be up here, to be speaking to you, Fred's, surrounded by Fred's friends and family. My God, look at you all. I shouldn't be where I am. Behind the speakers. Okay. Then I'll go blind from the sun. It's really fun to share thoughts and feelings with such an amazing group about an amazing human being. Can you hear his voice? I can hear his voice in my head. And it is warm and calm and thoughtful. I feel his kindness, his wisdom, his peace. I know his joy and zeal and passion in learning about, in experiencing, and in sharing knowledge about everything around us. This amazing ecosystem. Fred was called an environmental warrior by Carol Carson in a news article years ago. As I was looking at Facebook, I realized that there were many voices who had found the words we search for to describe him. As word of his passing spread, hundreds of people spoke up. These are just a few. Ruth Ingram called him a wonderful gentleman. Lorraine Ross said he was a lovely, kind person. Barry Burt remembered quality time with Fred doing work in the river. Daja Evans added, Lorraine Ross said he was a lovely, kind person. Daja Evans added funny to that list. And a teacher and leader who owned kids, respect and affection. Barry Burt remembered quality time with Fred and the river. Jeff Kennedy wrote of Fred's impact on his family as a role model for us all. Amber Walker remembered his kindest of hearts. Jim Keller said he was left full of Fred's contagious delight and curiosity for our natural areas. Ray Goyne Smith described him as a warm, vital, passionate, ethical person. So many felt bereft, worried for Roberta and her family. Many were left incredulous, having just literally seen him the day before, or the week before, around town, or as he and Roberta showed their latest film with the docents at Henry Cowell, and with the SLV Rotary Club. How could he be gone? My husband Ken and I are personally very grateful that seeing the need to share the message of stewardship of the watershed. Fred became an adept and highly accomplished videographer, producing videos with Roberta, who has an equally powerful resume of commitment to the community and whose endearing voice narrates the films. Fred and Roberta focused on the places and creatures they loved, and their videos have the power to make us desire to love and protect those places as well. As his friends in the Santa Cruz Mountains Bioregional Council pointed out, by the way, Google Santa Cruz Mountains Bioregional Council, you want to be a part of it. We can turn to their videos to see through their eyes the redwoods in our forests, the steelhead in our streams, the native flowers in our grasslands, and all the native plants and animals that live in the many wonderful different watersheds found in the Santa Cruz Mountains, a bioregion that he loved so much. We will all miss his knowledge of and passion for nature. We will miss his friendship, his mentorship. Who am I going to call? His congeniality, his wisdom, his joy in people, his joy in food, his joy in parties, his joy in the world. We can learn through his optimistic and gracious nature the lessons he gave us in how to live in peace. May we all hold Fred's memory in our hearts and his passion in our actions to fulfill his mission. And I just want to point out that if you don't own all of his videos, you should. He and Roberta have such an amount of information and quality visuals that you won't see them yourself. You have to spend hours watching. And you can pick them right here at Henry Cowell, including the most recent one on Fall Creek. And you should know that HIP Santa Cruz, which is a 4-volume history of Santa Cruz that Ralph Abram put together with Fred and a bunch of other people, a whole bunch of other people. The latest volume is out, and it is available. It's $10, and oh my gosh, All right, you can pick one up right here, $10, the latest volume, and Fred's words are in there. And you will recognize both his style, his love, and we need to remember what happened in the past so we can preserve the good for the future. Thanks to Fred. Who's next?
Yes. So,
Go behind.
okay, could you bring a couple of those chairs over here for Susan and, excuse me, Susan and John Caker? They could use a couple of chairs over here. Does anybody want to help carry two of those chairs? Stephen, you got them? Great, thank you. Okay. So I only have a couple things to say, and then we're just going to open it up to everybody else who would like to speak. There's a couple of things about this time of year that Fred loved. One was he loved the solstice. One was it was almost his birthday. It would have been his 81st birthday on July 1st. And the other one was this is thimbleberry season. All the ripe thimbleberries, he would be out along our driveway picking thimbleberries every day. And he would just be so happy. What else did I want to say? Oh, well, there were a couple of things about Fred that I found when I was going through his notes. He had files and files of things, and sometimes he would scribble something down and he'd put it away someplace, and maybe it'd be somewhere, I'd find it when I was going through everything. And one of the things he liked to do was he liked to try to figure out if he had pretty close to perfect pitch, and he would hear the refrigerator going off, or he would hear anything. He would say, "Go over to the piano, would you?" and hit an A, and then that would be what the refrigerator was on, or the notes that the computer played when it turned on, or all kinds of things like that. The vacuum cleaner, the beans cooking on the back burner. But my very favorite one at the bottom of the list was big black housefly. I just thought that was just so Fred. It was like everything was worth paying attention to. So anyway, I know that I got to spend a lot of time with Fred, and it was a real joy for me most of the time. And within that time frame, I did lots of things, like getting to know about the big black housefly and watch him get sidetracked on his way and to do something else to stop and play the piano. But I also know that each of you had some part of a relationship with Fred that I don't know about. That you had some private moment with him at a plant sale, or at a bioregional council meeting, or working on water board elections, or whatever it might have been. It was just a moment there. And I would love to hear your stories about Fred. So you can just come up as you like and take the mic, and we're going to start with Jim Nelson.
Well, hello, and it's wonderful to see all the people here and the amazing food. And all right, I made a couple notes so I wouldn't just get speechless up here. Then one thing I want to mention is that I run Camp Joy. I garden all the time. I met Fred in '71 when I first started Camp Joy, and I've known him his whole life since then. And his garden was amazing, and it evolved into the most beautiful little place. It was probably pretty private for him. He had terraces up this unlikely hill where nobody like me could ever think that you'd have a garden, and it was just beautiful. He raised a lot of plants in containers, and had beautiful raspberries, and he would always come to our plant sale to get peppers, hot peppers, and planted them up there. And so I came up there shortly after Fred passed, and I have a little momentum here that Roberta gave me. And besides his love of gardening, I'd like to talk about Fred's love of music. And one of my fondest memories is, well, first I want to play this little chime in Fred's. Let's see if it picks up here. I don't know. No, I think I can. So I hope that calls some of Fred here. I'm sure he's here with us, and his spirit is here, and he's influenced us so much from the very moment of a long, well, I'm not going to, his activism, when I first met him, he was working very hard on changing the general plan, and thank God that he did, and that it got changed. And so, okay, so here's one of my favorite memories. Fred ran kids classes at Camp Joy for many years with the homeschool, and Fred loved kids, and he worked really well with Terry and Ed and other people that worked at Camp Joy at the time. And so there was a parade in Santa Cruz. I think it was Carnival or the Brazilian. It was a Brazilian event, and I have a very bright orange truck, which is appropriate for a Brazilian event. And we decorated it all up and built little sideboards. And Fred worked for several weeks training these kids to play a tune on steel drums that they had made. And they were all on the back of the orange truck, was sitting on straw bales and playing this song, and Fred was there, and he was keeping time for them. He was tapping on a cymbal or a drum, and it was the kids did so well. It was like that, what is that song? It's like, way down by the seaside sifting sand, all the little children love Mary Ann, Mary Ann, Mary Ann. We played that all the way down the main street, and it was a precious memory, and it was so beautiful for what Fred helped create it. So, having mentioned his love of music, I'm going to hand the mic to Michael, who's coming up here.
It's a challenging one. And, you know, blessings to Roberta. She lost two of her main men in this last year, Baba Haridas, who was her spiritual leader, guide, and Fred. There was a video that Fred wanted to do with Jamie Kelly, Curtis, Laura Devine, and me when we were Voices of the Valley. And that didn't manifest. Jamie has now gone to the other side. And so this is a song that I think many people can join in on. I think it will become familiar. It's a Doc Watson song that was sung in Brother, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? As I went down to the valley to pray, thinking about those good old days, and who will wear the robe and crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, fathers, let's go down. Come on down, let's go down. Oh, fathers, let's go down, down to the river to pray. as I went down to the river to pray, thinking about the good old ways and who will wear the starry crown. Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, mothers, let's go down. Come on down, let's go down. Oh, mothers, let's go down, down to the river to pray. As I went down to the valley to pray, studying about those good old ways and who will wear the robe and crown. Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, brothers, let's go down. Come on down, come on down. Oh, brothers, let's go down, down to the river to pray. As I went down to the river to pray, thinking about those good old ways and who will wear the starry crown. Good Lord, show us the way. Oh, sisters, let's go down. Come on down, let's go down. Oh, sisters, let's go down, down to the river to pray. As I was thinking about those good old ways, oh, Lord, show us the way. Thank you. I also want to bring in my husband, Rob Menzies, who was the engineer for the San Lorenzo Valley Water District for many years. He's been gone now for almost 3.5 years. And it didn't take one person to replace him. It didn't take 2 people to replace him. It took 3. And recently that person was just hired on. I don't know who that is, but you know, Fred and Rob were quite close with a common interest. So who may I pass this on to?
Thank you very much. That's a really tough act to follow. My name's Steve Singer, and I'm on the board of directors of the Santa Cruz Mountains Bioregional Council, and Fred was also on our board. And I've actually had known Fred long before that. I first met him in the 70s when I was working on the San Lorenzo River Watershed Management Plan. And Fred was one of the people who was sort of advising and overseeing that whole effort by the county. It was really, turned out to be an appropriate way to meet him because, as I learned through the years, truly he was Mr. Watershed. He was always talking about watersheds, always talking about the importance of all the interrelationships in our bioregion. And as I look out here at the huge number of people that are here, and all the relationships he established, and different relationships, different projects, different groups, different things going on. To me, that's ecology, right? That's interrelationship. What a perfect example of a healthy ecosystem was all the friendships and relationships that Fred built. But anyway, I wanted to mention a couple things. There's a fairly recent interview with Fred, accessible through the Bioregional Council website. If you just go to our home page and go to the bottom, there's a section called Be Provided Radio, and there's about a 30-minute interview with Fred that's available there. Another thing, I mean, Fred as a board member was always suggesting things we could do to improve our web page, and a lot of his suggestions ended up going on to the web. There's a section called Views of Loma Prieta, which contains pictures of Loma Prieta from different perspectives with different items in the foreground, different locations in the foreground. And Fred said he was inspired by a book called 100 Views of Mount Fujiyama, or sorry, Mount Fuji. And I haven't actually seen that book, but it must have had some impression on him. So he started taking pictures, and a number of them are up on our website. And it's, you know, we're going to keep that there as kind of a tribute to him. You know, we really we really miss him. And when I see Loma Prieta, I always think of him, because Loma Prieta is the tallest mountain in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and Fred was a mountain of a man. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Mosier, and I met Fred relatively late, 30-some years ago. Michelle, my wife, and I had just moved into a house right over in Gold Gulch, right across the river over here. And shortly after we moved in, we learned that the state parks had been ordered by Governor Duke Majan to make more money. And so the regional director here got the great idea of putting tent cabins all through here. I think it was 40 or 50 tent cabins. We were, needless to say, a little concerned because the plan didn't include any added resources to the state park to take care of all the people that would come in here, and had no. They announced that they didn't have to do any environmental assessment because, after all, they were the state, so they could put this into the riparian, these cabins into the riparian zone. So we started organizing, and it was that. I don't remember exactly how I met Fred, but Fred found me, and he had that gentle and twinkle in his eye. And my first impression was, Fred's going to be a great ally in this, but we're going to have to find someone who can really lead this. And boy, was I wrong, because he was called an environmental warrior. I would call him a gentle warrior, because he always had that glint in his eye, was always very optimistic, but boy, did he organize the opposition. And it was such a pleasure to work with him on that project. We worked on, he helped us knock out Cowell, get them out of this valley. He was a huge, huge ally in that. He worked tirelessly for the water district. Most recently, our most recent campaign was the effort to maintain our water district with an excellent board. Unfortunately, that was one of the battles we didn't win, and we're going to continue that fight in Fred's honor. He was a huge, huge help in that battle. But the story that most epitomizes who Fred was one of the last times I saw him. I was taking one of my hikes through the park, and I was going right along the trail along the river, and there was Fred, and he had about 8 boys. I think they were all boys, 8 or 10. They're between ages of maybe 7 and 10, and they were all going around, and they had tape measures, and they were measuring the width, the circumference of the sycamore trees. And Fred was standing there. He had that twinkle in his eye, and he looked at me, and we were chatting. And I said, "So Fred, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I challenged them. I said I can't remember what the prize was, but he was going to give a prize to the boy that found the biggest sycamore in this grove." And I don't know how that worked out, but I thought, boy, that he just knew how to be with kids and how to bring that appreciation for nature and the environment. And I so appreciated all his contributions to this valley, and I appreciated the opportunity to be his friend. Thank you.
I met Fred when I was a boy in about 1950, maybe 1949. Been in contact with him through his whole life, with not always frequent contact, but certainly occasional contact. I want to tell you a couple stories about Fred's childhood. We were members of the Boy Scout troop that you might have noticed on the board over there. And that meant we did a lot of activities together as part of that group. One kind of activity that we did was, as Boy Scouts do, hiking and camping, right? one year, well, let me back up. Fred had family in Kernville, up in the Sierras. And very generously, his parents would invite the troop, or members of the troop, to go up and spend some time at Kernville. And have those kinds of experiences were just a continuous theme throughout our childhood and youth. We also went to summer camp at a place called Camp Whitsett, which is about an hour, hour and a half drive uphill from Kernville. Now at Camp Whitsett, there was a kind of a challenge hike that you could do in a group. It was called the Silver Knapsack, and if you completed the Silver Knapsack, you would get a little pin to put on your Boy Scout uniform. So one year, several of the members of our troop decided to do the Silver Knapsack, and we had a guide so that we wouldn't get lost out there. And Fred was a member of that group. I remember the group better than any individual acts of Fred's. But this will give you an idea, I think, of the kind of experiences that we shared. It was about a 55-mile hike, and we had approximately 6 days, as I remember, to do the hike. So we started out for a couple days, and on the third day, the route was to descend from the higher mountains down into the Kern River Canyon and spend a day down there. So we did that, and we had a great time playing in the river. It was rapids, and we would wade in the rapids and so on. And then, being a kind of ambitious group of kids, we decided that we were going to set a record for the speed with which we completed the Silver Knapsack. So according to the schedule, we were supposed to stay the night down at the Kern River and then hike up the next day and go on the rest of the route. So we left. We didn't stay the night. We walked back up to the top of the canyon that afternoon. And then we decided we were going to make one shot and go all the way to the end of the hike overnight. So we did that. We hiked all night long, taking care of each other, making sure nobody got left behind or anything. And we arrived back at Camp Whitsett at about 5 in the morning. We were 2 days early. So we had met our goal. We set a record for the speed of doing the Silver Knapsack. And we took every step of what we were supposed to take to complete this massive hike. However, the directors of the camp were not pleased. They assumed that we had to have cheated somewhere along the way and taken a more direct route back to the camp, because they didn't think anybody could complete that hike in 3.5 days. Fortunately, our guide stood up for us and insisted that we had walked every step of the route. And so we were awarded the Silver Knapsack pins. So we had a lot of adventures like that as kids in the Scouts. And then after that, and I have to say something about what Fred was like as a boy. People have talked about the twinkle in his eye. That came from his childhood. He was an eye twinkler as a young kid. He was never bothered by anything. He was always very even-tempered and full of interest in what was going on around him. He had wry comments to make about things that would happen in our group, right? But he was never angry about anything. He loved plants and gardening. And this love was really a sensuous kind of love. Some of our neighbors, I think even in his yard, there was persimmon trees. And he would pick a persimmon and smell it and think about that smell with a smile on his face, right? And then, if it was appropriate, he would eat it too. But if not, he would set it aside so that he could eat it later. He taught me things. One of the things that I remember very vividly was on a Saturday afternoon, I went over to his house. We spent the afternoon together. We got a little bit hungry, and he asked me if I wanted to have a snack. So I said, sure. And he said, how about a peanut butter and banana sandwich? Has anybody here ever heard of a peanut butter and banana sandwich? Many people have. I had not. I was shocked at the idea of a peanut butter and banana sandwich, not jelly. But he made a peanut butter and banana sandwich for me, and I loved it. Later on, after we finished high school, Fred went to California State University, Northridge, which was a new university at that time. I went to UCLA. We used to get together at the Northridge Library and study, and we had a group of us. Don Ritchie was another person that Fred maintained a lifelong contact with, who was at CSUN at the same time that he was. So we would study together. And we had different majors, but we would talk about our different majors and the ideas that were important to us and so on. Thinking back on it, I can see Fred beginning to build that passion about the environment during those years, high school years and college years. After college, our paths diverged. I didn't see him for several years, but I can remember I was getting ready to leave for South America and went and visited him in Chicago, where he was getting his master's degree. And he kind of showed us around Chicago for a little while. And then later on, after I came back to California, I went out to China Lake, where he taught school for a short time. And I was newly back from South America, really out of it as far as understanding what was happening in the United States at that point. He played an album by Bob Dylan for me. I'd never heard Bob Dylan before. Didn't even know who Bob Dylan was, right? And that changed my life in a way. It really tuned me into a whole realm of American culture that I was completely unaware of. And he had that knack for doing things like that. I came up to visit him as I was finishing my graduate training, and at that point he lived in Redwood City and was teaching, I can't remember the name of the high school, was teaching at a what in those days we used to call a free school, right? A free high school. And I spent a day with him at the high school. Being a teacher myself, I was really interested in what was going on. That day changed my perspective about education. Okay. All right. So anyway, it had a big effect on me as a teacher and as an educator. I'm going to read a little poem for you, and then I'll get out of the other people's way. Okay. All right, this is a poem I wrote a few years ago about those years going to Kernville. It's called Sweep of the Kern, for Fred and Jimmy. Jimmy was Fred's dad. Kernville. Leaving town, the river swerves, rockline channel deeper than a boy's length, running down to Isabella in a dream of hillside chaparral and scattered pines. The boys like jetsam, floating in the stream, hunched on breath-blown mattresses and inner tubes, or feet first, floating, riding the current like an easy chair or no-hands bike, past jagged banks and smoothed down river rocks, through shallows, wading bear-like on the stones where fat fish lurk at dusk, past lone beaches bright with summer sands and willow groves, past pyrite flakes and quicksand beds, and silent gathered crows, to the lake's lip. This was the sound, this the sight, this the taste of summer on the Kern. And I'm eternally grateful to Fred for giving me that kind of experience.
Hello, my name is T. Mike Walker. I met Fred in 1968 when I came to Santa Cruz, right about the time that he and Roberta came to Santa Cruz. There was a fellow named Marcellus Barnes, tall black man who had escaped from New York because he had been a model in a very fancy magazine that didn't like what he did. So he came out here and began to live a wonderful life, and he was sort of like a connector. He would go from tribe to tribe, because at that time in Santa Cruz, it seems that there were a lot of people around the country who were having psychedelic experiences or just breaking the mold with the 50s and the 60s and looking for new ways to live. And many of them came to Santa Cruz and immediately recognized each other and began to live and create and change this rather quiet, bucolic town into the thriving community is today. One of the things Fred believed in was fundamentals, and by that he meant the fun that's at the core of nature. And one of the things that he and Marcellus and a fellow named Ralph Abraham, who was a teacher up at the university then, and a whole bunch of other people did was we began a series of moon festivals where we bring musicians and dancers, artists, philosophers, crazy people, and altogether far too sane ones together on mountaintops around the fire all night long while we played music and danced. And we baptized every major, in 3 years, I think we hit about 25 or 30 major mountaintops all around the Santa Cruz area. It was wonderful. We were very careful with the fires. We promised that. But anyhow, among all those things that happened before Fred got into the river and reconstructing the way people thought about rivers and joining the minds. It was sort of a mind meld in Santa Cruz. Groups of people who had affinities for each other came together and created wonderful things. Food Corps started, and next thing you knew, we had natural bridges and staff of life. Midwives came together, and the next thing you knew, babies being at home, born all over the place, and a couple of mine in that too. How many here are midwives? I'm just curious. Are involved with them? Yeah, there are some. Thank you for being on the earth. Appreciate you. How many came to moon festivals? Anybody here? Oh, thank you. All right, wonderful. We're dying fast. It's all right. I'm 81. Fred was 81. You know, we're here for a while. That's part of the fundamentals. And so you enjoy it while you're here and you keep going. So to leave footprints behind, a bunch of us decided with Ralph to start a series of books. It started with Hip Santa Cruz #1, talking about just these things I mentioned. And it's now, we're working on volume 5. The first 4 volumes are for sale at a table, Hiroka, in the back. It has all of the bottles, they're all $10 a volume. Roberta has a wonderful there about the women's club and organization in the valley here that started. Fred's got a wonderful one on in fact, he's in volume 1, he's in volume 2, volume 3. Volume 1 and 3, okay, volume 1 and 3. But he's mentioned in every volume because Fred touched everyone's heart. And I don't think there's anybody who ever met him who wasn't moved. And I thank God he came here, and I thank you all for being here to celebrate his life. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lyle Troxel. My parents knew Fred before I was born, and I grew up with Kusum. And when I was probably 5 or so, my grandparents, Shirley and David Bird, moved next to Fred and Roberta up in Boulder Creek. And so we spent a lot of time up there. The families are pretty close. I have a story from Fred when I was 6, and we're sleeping over, probably me and my sister, or maybe both my sisters and I are sleeping over, visiting Kusum and sleeping in the very small house. And I'm on the floor, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and it's way up in the mountains, there's no light, there's nothing, not even like a clock radio light. I don't even know how, but I was able to find the kitchen drawer that had a flashlight in it. And I grabbed the flashlight and turned it on, and the world exploded into light around me, and I went back to sleep. And in the morning, Fred asked me about the flashlight and why it might be out of batteries. And I looked up to a small window that faces up the hill, and in the window was one of those little dinosaur sculptures that made of a whole bunch of slices of balsa wood you put together. And I said, the dinosaur did it. And Fred went up to the shelf and picked the dinosaur up, brought it down, and said, really? How could this dinosaur do that? It's made of wood. And we both started to imagine how a dinosaur might have done it. And we concluded that it had to be a dinosaur outside the house that had come into the house. He just, he connected with you so well. It's beautiful. What a great way to talk to a child, He knew that I knew what happened. He knew that I was like, oh yeah, I shouldn't do that. To this day, I'm very good at turning off flashlights. I've been blessed in this world with a lot of amazing mentors. Quite a few of them are here. Hey, Nick. Saw you a second ago. Thank you, Nick. And Fred. And many, many people that help guide me and teach me and show me that there's something else to look at in the world. And I'm really grateful for Fred and a lot of you for that. So be a teacher, be a mentor to people. Every one of us can do that. Thank you. The chair is temporary, by the way. I'm having surgery soon, so don't worry about that. Betsy? Where's Del? Sorry.
That's a great story. Hi, everybody. What a long, strange trip it's been. Who knew? Who could have guessed that two kids from Brooklyn could ever have lived a life such as Lou and I have lived in a redwood forest? Light years away from life as urbanites in New York City. Not yet. I'll tell you when to come. In 1990, we met up with Mr. and Mrs. McPherson. And suddenly, our lives took a sharp left turn. We never could get the folks back home. Here, hold this thing. This is in my way. We never could get the folks back home to understand what happened. We barely could understand it ourselves. As time went along, is this okay? As time went along, Lou and I and our children learned, with Fred's help, to live in the woods. Fred and I had very long conversations about living with nature, birthing babies, raising them, educating them, and came up with some very strange and strong opinions, creative lifestyles, and fearless improvising, which gave birth to Upper Valley School, followed by homeschool, followed by Charter 25. All along the way, it was a deep belief in family and community-based education that guided us. Fred opened my eyes to the magical natural world. As Misty observed, his life force was unstoppable. He and we were relentless in the pursuit of our dream, oblivious to the criticism of others. Every time we got pushed down, Fred just got a sparkle in his eye and a song in his soul. When life got really tough, Fred, instead of getting beaten down, would join his leprechaun friends and walk in the forest, humming and playing his thumb harps. So here we are, as night falls softly in this valley and fingers of fog start to descend I could feel Fred's approving smile. Get out your sleeping bag and join the stars, the wind, and the owls. Waken to the screeching of the jays, the song of the creek, the disappearing fog, and sunlight streaming through the trees. Believe there is magic everywhere. So let's pay tribute to Fred. Get out your instruments if you have one. You can use spoons and tables. You can pick up, will you pass that, Celeste, will you get the, who wants to play Fred's thumb harp? Anybody out there? Oh, come on. Karen, come on. Thank you. Because Fred said whatever sound we made was perfect music. So we're just going to make perfect music. You can hum. Come on, who's going to play this thumb harp? Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah. No, just go back there with that. Idra, that way. That way. Okay, what else is there? Are there other instruments? Anywhere, anywhere. You can sit anywhere.
Here's another thumb harp for anyone. This is the smallest thumb harp.
Oh, come on, guys. All you have to do, because Fred said whatever sound we made was perfect music. So we're going to make perfect music by humming, singing, beating the table with spoons, playing thumb harps, and where's my tambourine? You have my tambourine? Yeah. Okay.
Stepping on the chord, Stell. Stell asked me, I'm Nick Herbert. Stell asked me to come and assist her in getting you all to sing and gather and stand up and make music. And Dan Heading wanted to remind me that Fred was one of the founders of Aloni Radio. Aloni Radio, right here, channeling the Aloni spirit. It's broadcasting 24 hours a day, and certain people can hear it and respond to it. And let's tune in now to Aloni Radio. Only you can hear it, only you can do it. Go! Go!
Yeah, who's the next person?
Come with me.
Who's next?
Thank you. Good, there you go.
That was perfect music, wasn't it? My name is Suzanne Shetler, and I was a mentor to a number, this is going to be a different, this is not nostalgic, this is more of a tribute. I was a mentor to a number of San Lorenzo Valley High School students for several years who... Is that better? Oh, I can hear from here, it's better. My name is Suzanne Shetler. For a number of years, I was a mentor to students at San Lorenzo Valley High School who were involved in an environmental studies program. It turns out that Fred initiated that program and was a strong supporter of it and was a mentor himself.
Pretend it's like an ice cream cone. Point it towards your mouth.
It doesn't taste very good. Doesn't even drip. These students at the end of the year put on, every year just before graduation, a science symposium to present their work. A lot of their work is team study that they have done on a monitoring project of one sort or another, and most of them are preparing for the science fair, and some of them of course make it to win and move on to the state level. After the science symposium this year, well, before the science symposium, we learned that the funding that the San Lorenzo Valley Water District had provided for the environmental studies program was being discontinued, had already been discontinued. And so Linda Broadman, who's the premature white-haired lady here, prematurely white, came up to me and said, what would you think about the Native Plant Society? She's the local chapter president. What would you think about the Native Plant Society giving a grant in Fred's honor? And I thought it was a great idea. We took it to the board. They thought it was a great idea, and they voted to donate $3,000 per year for 3 years to the environmental studies program to give it a boost. It has a new teacher now, so there's kind of a new renaissance, and it will be called the Fred McPherson Memorial Grant.
Hi, I'm Holly Harmon, and I met Fred in 1966-67. He was my biology teacher at Pacific High School, and I lived in Ben Lomond, and he lived in Boulder Creek, so my mom would drive me to his house, and then he would drive me to school 45 minutes every day. So I got to spend that time with Fred. And one thing I learned from him that he would do, which I would never do, but he would eat the little tiny baby poison oak leaves to make himself immune from the poison oak, which I guess probably works. I used to take the serum and it worked. But so after Pacific High School, after I graduated, I went to Art Institute, and I left the area. And years later, someone gave me some photographs about the hippie commune in Santa Cruz Mountains, and I decided to write a book. And I tried to, go online and get some information about this area, what I could do to put this all together. And through different channels, I found Fred. And so we reconnected, probably I think that was in 2011 or 12. We reconnected, and he was so helpful on the project. I mean, he dug up all his archives and sent me what he had and CDs of photographs, and we even through him I was able to contact Max Hartstein in Indiana and get the film from the river, from the waterfall, and and so I did a documentary film as well. And then I found out that Fred had, helped work on the whole project with Highland Park and all that. And so he helped me so much with just all the knowledge of what I needed to know to help move my project along and make it happen. And the last time I saw him, we were in Bookshop Santa Cruz, and I just all of a sudden stopped and I sat down on this couch that was there because I felt like I just really wanted to spend time with Roberta and Fred and not be looking around in the shop at books, random, whatever, and just have like a special time with him. And so that was the last time I saw him. And just...
There's a scene in Holly's documentary film Inside a Hippie Commune where the sheriff comes, and we're all on the other side of the rainbow down there, and the sheriff comes and says, "Get out of the water," and we're all on acid and shit, and we're just having a great time, and we're on the other side of the waterfall. We're all naked, and then the sheriff, put on the megaphone, "Get out of the water," and everyone, "Come and join us," someone yelled, he wasn't good. So we all had to get out of the river and the waterfall. Well, Fred's the guy who makes it out, so everyone can go down into that waterfall. Now he's the guy who made it possible for now the cops aren't going to come and tell you to get out of the waterfall. That's Fred.
The people that lived there said that it was on private property, and Fred said, the river is not private property, it's the river. So anyway.
My name is Kate Boland, and I'm Raven Lang's friend, and I'm stealing this story from her. May I have permission to tell it, Raven? Okay. She told it on the way to this memorial. 1000 Albert Road is kind of a famous place in the valley. And early on, there were several couples living there. And one day, Raven saw these guys get out with their chainsaws. And she says, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we're here to cut down the trees." "What trees?" "Well, those trees over there." The Redwood Grove, a redwood circle. And she says, "Well, who gave you permission to do that?" "Well, Kenny did." And she runs to Kenny, and Kenny says, "Well, yeah, I did. We voted on it. I thought we were supposed to vote on things around here." Well, it turned out that all the men voted on it. And all the women hadn't been included in this discussion. So after a to-do, Fred was called as a consultant on the trees because someone said the trees were dead and they could be cut. And so Fred comes up to Alba Road, and I kind of want to gesture this. He spends 2.5 hours with the grove and the trees, and he's going... And everybody wonders where he is. Well, where's Fred? What's he doing? And he's communing. He's listening to the trees. And he came back and he said, "These trees are alive and well. And they stand to this day." Thank you, Raven.
I just have a quick request from the audience. In honor of Fred, please make sure that we pick up every little piece of trash and leave the forest beautiful for him. And we do have some people serving dishes over here that have been rinsed. So if you don't find it over there, it's over here.
Just based on that last story, has anyone made the connection between Fred McPherson and the Lorax? I mean, it looks and likes, and I think Fred speaks for the trees.
Hi, my name's Ken Landy. I'm a docent here. I met Fred when my wife and I started about 15 years ago, so we're newbies. But how many docents do we have here from Henry Cowell? Yeah, quite a few. Good. Fred would give us a talk on geology, very different than his plant talk. And it was important for him to convey to us the concept of time. And I'm an engineer at training, so I understood what he was trying to do. And I helped him in one of these talks. He came out with a big roll of string, and we tacked it to one end of the room, and we went all the way to the other end of the visitor center with it. Then he went along with little pieces of paper and started hanging them on the string. And they had numbers on them. They were how many years ago? And at the very, very beginning of it, which was on, looking at him on the right, on your left, was today. And on the very, very end was, I don't remember how many millions of years ago. And this was to help convey to us the concept of time. So this was a very practical end, a practical aspect of Fred. Very different than everything I've been listening to here. But he had that ability to convey to us. And here's a group of adults who are becoming docents or who have been docents, okay? And he's teaching us about the rocks and which rocks were here then and which rocks were more recent, etc. And it was amazing to see this completely different perspective. Now, we've known him now, as I said, we knew him for 15 years, and we got to see this talk and other talks and many of his plant and nature talks as well. But I thought it was important to convey that with all of this, there was this very practical aspect in Fred's mind on how to convey a piece of information in a method that people would understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Toward that end, I'd just like to say Fred's nickname for a whole bunch of us back at the beginning of our project was Fredwood. Right, Fredwood. He approved of that name.
Hi, I'm Shauna Reiswitz, and I met Fred when I got a job at SLV Homeschool, Charter 25. As he was retiring, I came in and took his place in a way. Here's one of my students now from them. And so one of the things, and he along with Estelle and Tom, taught me what it is to raise children in a community and trust children and families to give them the best education that we could. But one of the things that keeps coming back to me that I just wanted to mention is Fred, one time we were talking and he said, and maybe all of you have heard this, this might be super obvious, but I just want to make sure everyone hears this, because he had this idea that wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of our kind of artificial towns and counties and states, everything was arranged by watershed politically. And wouldn't that just be the most wonderful thing? If
Hi, my name's Scott Lavelle, and I've known the McPherson's for a long time. And I have not planned this. This is not a notes thing or anything like that. But basically, I met them in 1978, and my mom was a drug addict, and I never met my father at all. So Fred kind of took that in. I wanted to get this known that family was very important to him, and Roberta and Fred were a huge link for me to really stabilize my life and become who I am today. Because without them, my mom slept all day long, and I never met my father, like I said. So I was going to be lost and not be able to come back to where I am, now is just amazing, because Fred was always there for me. And I know now from listening to all you guys people that he was as kind to everyone else as he was to me, but I took it like, wow, I'm treated like a son. This is just amazing. I've never had this feeling before. So I just wanted to, come up here and state that, he was a family man. All this science stuff, all this nature, I love that, and I'm on his side and believe in that too. But he was very much a family man, and I will miss him forever. Thank you. Looks like we're at the...
Hi, this is a great education for me, as knowing Roberta and Fred has been. Paul, my husband, and I are really newbies. We've been in the Valley maybe 11 or 12 years, but we have had and have most amazing neighbors. Fred and Roberta McPherson, and there's a few of us here who are neighbors or were here today. And Fred and Roberta, first of all, you don't know this, but I always tell everybody that you are matriarch and patriarch of the neighborhood. And we just love them, and we love you, Roberta. And the thing that Fred always said, and Roberta, and by the way, Roberta did all the editing of the films. I just want to say that. Yeah, and she's an amazing editor and learned the software, which is no easy feat. I have to add, that's a very technical thing to learn how to do. And anyway, so there's that. And also, Fred is the one, I don't know that we ever hung out separately. I was always with you and Fred, almost always, unless I would run into Fred on the road, which does happen and did happen. And but Fred taught me, first of all, about the native berries and the non-native berries, and you did too, the number of leaves, the 5 leaves and the 3 leaves, and what was invasive and what wasn't, and not everything, but enough for me to pay attention, and also spoke about the watershed and about how special this part and how unique this environment is here, this between our redwoods and the coast. And I think that, I don't remember the one other place that he compared it to. There was one other place on Earth, on this entire Earth, that was somewhat similar. We're in a very unique environment, and I learned that from Fred. He taught me to do research. He led me to so many things that he's led so many people to, but I'm so forever grateful. And Roberta, I will come see you soon. And I just wanted to say he was an amazing neighbor, and it was just, and Roberta continues to be, and has been just such an amazing thing to step into in Boulder Creek, to have this not only loving and beautiful people, but with it all of the information that they share and know. So a little bit of the personal life here, and yes, you're Miss Fred, and I'm sure that you're up there and just giggling to yourself at this wonderful gathering. Thank you. I didn't learn the lesson.
Al, you want to come join me at all? I'm Sun Lundell. This is Al Lundell, and we know Fred and Roberta through Fred's interest in creating educational materials and Roberta's interest in learning to use computers so that they could share their precious knowledge of nature with everyone. And the main thing that Fred means to me is that magic is always alive, because he ran around this world and just saw every moment and every person and every living thing as precious. And he couldn't help but bring that into his conversation. And one of the most precious moments I had with him was him being very concerned for a mutual friend of ours who had just confided in him something very sad. And Fred came over to me as a mutual friend and said, "Let's pray for him." And so it's a little hard to say how important it was, the way that Fred touched everyone just by seeing them. And I'm very grateful. And I just felt like I should share that with you.
Thank you. I was Fred's drone pilot. Towards the end, he saw how we were flying the drones, and he loved that. He thought, wow, to see the San Lorenzo Valley, the mountains that he loved from a bird's eye view, how special is that? So he wanted to include that in his videos, and I helped him with that process. And just to
end on a humorous note with this. One time we were filming the San Lorenzo River in Boulder Creek. There's a little bridge that goes over the San Lorenzo River. And I was flying a drone shot where I was catching, going the tunnel under the bridge, the water. We're going back up and away to reveal the San Lorenzo River and then the whole mountains above that. And we were doing that shot, and he loved that. And then he asked me if I could fly the drone through the tunnel. And I know it would be a little dangerous because I'd lose all GPS connection, radio connection would be, a little dicey. But hey, we thought we might as well try it. So as I got close to the tunnel, suddenly my drone was losing power, and I'm playing with the controls, and it's just landing in the water. And there's nothing I could do about it. I had lost total control. I hadn't even got into the tunnel yet. And then it hit the water, and then I tried to push it forward and make it go across the water, and I had a little bit of control where I was able to skitter like a mosquito across the surface of the water to the other side of the San Lorenzo River, and then it sank right there. and so Fred and I were watching this. I immediately started running, and the other side of the cliff was very steep, and we had to run down this incredible poison oak cliff. And I went down, and I saw the drone just under the surface with the light still blinking under the water. It got caught in the weeds. And Fred, like a mountain goat, was right behind me. And to make sure that I was okay and the drone was okay, he was right there. And we were able to, he held my hand, and I went out into the water, and I was able to grab the drone from under the water about 5 feet down and pulled it out and, ran back up, and we packed it in rice and prayed. Yeah, and 3 days later, we pulled it out, and it actually worked. So happy ending. So that was fun. Yeah, that footage maybe is in the video. I don't know, but it's there. So I love Fred. It was great to work with him. I learned so much about our neighborhood, and it was truly magic. And I miss him deeply. Yeah, thank you.
One quick thing, very quick. Hello. I probably represent a large group of people who almost knew Fred, and I really miss Fred. I'd meet him at Native Plant Society meetings and plant sales, and I always felt incredibly special when Fred smiled at me, and I knew he cared for me deeply, even though we never went to each other's homes or anything. So as Native Plant Society, a tribute to him, I put together these little envelopes of seeds of Ruby Chalice Clarkia. I grew them, I collected them. They are local natives, ethically gathered. And I made lots of envelopes of these for you to take home. So, and hopefully they would grow. They're beautiful annual wildflowers. And then when they come up every year, you can perhaps think of Fred. I do want to encourage you that if you live outside the San Lorenzo or Soquel Creek watersheds, don't plant them in the wild. Fred would not really like that because he was very concerned about ecology and ecosystems, and these were gathered in these watersheds, right on the ridge that divides these watersheds, actually. But if you live in a suburban area and you have a garden, you're welcome to sow them there. There are simple instructions. They're over there by the pictures. And if you run out of these, I have a few more. I have some more I brought with me. So anyway, thank you.
My name is Val Algren, and my husband Dexter and I knew Roberta and Fred from the middle 70s. And the most, I endorse everything that's been said today, but the most fascinating thing to me is that if this valley were to be occupied today, they'd meet no resistance because everybody's here. And I think the most enormous tribute to Fred is all of you, that his life and Roberta's connected with all of us.
And I think it's most remarkable. And he will be missed, is missed by all the fauna and flora of this area.
Hi, I just wanted to say something kind of quick. I'm Fred's sister, and as I've listened to everyone, I have to say it just has echoed everything I've always been lucky enough to know. I had two wonderful brothers. They were both teachers. And as I've gone through my life, people will say, "How do you know that?" And I would think, "Oh, Fred told me that." And if I went on a walk or whatever it would be, I would hear the echoes of Fred, my brother Pat also. But Mike, who was up here from the Boy Scouts, very important to Fred. Those men stayed together. They still are together. A few of them died this year, but they always stayed in touch. It was such an amazing thing to watch young men learn about manhood and then never forget a loyal friend and stay together. And that helped Fred be who he was to all of you, that learning. And he continued to share it. And Fred was an amazing person. He was always a teacher. He was a teacher to me. I always believed everything he told me, which was sometimes dangerous. But I always trusted him. He told me when I was a little girl and we were lying on the grass up in Kernville, we had a cabin there, and nightfall you could see, it was so dark there that you could see the whole Milky Way. Very beautiful. You could hear the river behind us, and we'd lay on this blanket, and we'd look up at the sky, and Fred would say to me, "Kathy, do you know what you're looking at?" And I'd say, "The stars." He said, "No, that is a giant Indian blanket, and you're seeing the holes to heaven, and God is on the other side." And I said, "They're not stars?" He said, "But that is part of the stars." And I remember that. I was like, okay. And I always look at the nightfall and stars, and I do think of that. And I will just tell all the students that might be here, he was doing that in 1953, 54, 55. He told me what people from Mars would be like. But he let me decide. And we went from Mars to Saturn. We were sitting in our living room and we were on the couch, and he'd say, "Okay, get out a piece of paper," and I am an artist, and he would say, that was my strength, right? So he'd teach me through that. And I got out my pencil, and he goes, "Okay, draw me a person from Mars." So I did, and then he would say, "Okay, what is Mars like, Kathy?" I said, "I don't know, Fred." And he'd go to the bookcase, find Mars. And I would, and he would show me elements of why that person that I drew probably couldn't live on Mars. And he'd make me reconsider it, and we'd talk about all the reasons why that person couldn't exist being the person that I had drawn. And I would ponder it, and then I'd redraw the person, and then he'd ask me another question, and it went on and on, but it was fun. So Fred was always a teacher. Before I became a teacher, he was a teacher. And he never let me drown in the river. And I always did. We had scary moments, but Kusum and her children are in the river in the rapids, and he taught them how to go down the rapids. That's his daughter and grandkids. So Kernville was always important, but there's another thing I wanted to share with all of you that hasn't been shared today. And what that was, he also was he was a ranger. I mean, he worked for the forest department, and he did that during college at San Fernando Valley State College. It wasn't CSUN yet. he was the first graduating class of that school in the valley. And during the summers, you know what happens in summer? Fire. So no one had mentioned that Fred really was a firefighter, and he fought some very fierce fires. And I always thought how brave he was to do that. And one time he went into the mountains for a forest fire, and we didn't know if Fred was coming back. We waited for many days. He was dropped in, but you know, he got separated. And he just knew which way was down. And he always had that feeling about feeling animals and things. And he found, which he wasn't sure where it was, but he found a mule that was left. They do that in the high country. They leave mules so people can pack out. And he found the mule and was lucky enough to come down that hill. But I wanted to say, you know, he has done wonderful things with the forest, but he also did the scary things and fought for the forest in that way too. So Fred was, as you all know, remarkable. And I loved him and I love him. I'll miss him forever. And it's just a real joy to see people who have aged. I was like 15 when a lot of these people were talking today. I was like, oh my God, we've all changed so much over the years. And it's good to see all the friends that I never got to meet and know that Fred was so loved. So anyway, thank you all for coming, and I'm glad I'm here too. So.
My name is Bruce Damer, and I lived across the road from Fred for 20 years or so. And I just got to know and love him. And I'm a history junkie. I have the DigiBarn Computer Museum in my barn with the history of computing. But getting to know Fred, I realized that the political action that they undertook starting in 1967-68 is the reason why we're sitting in this beautiful valley today that does not have strip malls and a 4-lane highway up the east side, because it was in the General Development Plan of 67. So take a look at this. General Development Plan would redevelop all the downtowns of the little towns and put in sewers, and it might be a good thing. But what it was replaced by is the hippie development plan with drawings and soil management and just beautiful. So this is really, I mean, between Fred and the whole committee and Max Hartstein, this is why we are sitting in such a beautiful place. And I just want to sort of recognize Fred for that. And Fred and I used to get together and talk about, I work on the origin of life at UC Santa Cruz. And we had this moment in which, when we've realized now that life started as a communal complex, not as individual little simple competing entities. It started as a communal complex. And so Fred brought all of his evolutionary biology books out, and we went through it, and we found this through line back 4 billion years to the communal start of the living world and how it matched some of Fred's personal philosophy all the way to today, and the sort of communal aggregate that has made this beautiful environmental movement work and these communities work. And I don't know, it's just little notes to share, but bless you, Fred, for helping create the beautiful world, or preserve or create the beautiful world that we live in.
So, if everyone who would like to speak has had a turn to speak, Michael.
It's a little spontaneous. I've only known Fred for maybe 5 years, and I was all ears as he talked about the San Lorenzo Valley, which I love and have been in since 1980. I had no idea that he helped build Pacific School and literally was hands-on in that way. Fred was one of the best examples that I've ever met of two principles that I try to live my life about. One of them is metaphysical, and I believe it is the source of all reality, and it's just 5 words. But Fred was better than just about anyone I know at reminding us what you think about expands. He would always say, focus on what you want instead of what you don't want. And I really appreciate that about him. And the other thing he did was he, through example, demonstrated what I call the Dalai Lama's one suggestion, which once I heard it, having been raised Southern Baptist, I kind of gave up my 10 commandments, not because they weren't valid, but because you don't need them anymore if you follow the Dalai Lama's one suggestion. And that is 5 more words. And Fred, just about better than anyone else I know, was very good at this one suggestion: be kind to each other. So between what you think about expands and being kind to each other, he was and is one of my greatest teachers. So last thing I'd like to say is, probably more than anyone else I could think of at this moment, pretty much anyone I can think of, period, he is an example of the eternal aha, here and now. And thank you.
So just a couple of cleanup things. I wanted to mention about the Clarkia, the seeds. If you drive up Graham Hill Road, as you're driving up Graham Hill Road, on the left-hand side, just before you get to Roaring Camp, there's a whole beautiful kind of a cliffside, not quite a cliff, but a hillside, full of pink blossoms right now. Those are Clarkia. They're very beautiful flower. That was one thing there were 3 or 4, but they've all flown out the window. So I just want to finish with this, because not everybody, I think, saw got a copy of the program. Fred was a Rosicrucian. Not everybody knows that, I think, for over 50 years. And for Rosicrucians, death corresponds to a rebirth on the spiritual plane and constitutes the most beautiful initiation an incarnated being can receive. The soul personality is allowed to free itself from the material world and reintegrate with its true home until the next incarnation. That was what Fred believed, and it is really what I believe as well. And so it is a joy to me to think that he's already exploring and doing whatever he's doing. I had a sense when he died that he was going, oh, there's my body down there. There's, oh my gosh, look at that. You know, and there he was off on the next adventure. So even though I miss him a great deal, I don't feel any sadness or concern about where he is or what he's doing. So thank you all so much for coming. The back table over there does have some giveaways. Excuse me. There's some DVDs of the last video we made together about the turkey foot, which is a part of our watershed. Some herbs that Fred gathered, mostly, I think, oregano, and a few maps and things like that. And they're all, you're all welcome to take any of those that you'd like. Thank you for coming, and just enjoy visiting with each other.
I would just like everybody to look next to you, find a stranger, and give each other a hug, because Fred has brought some beautiful spirits together today. Enjoy each other.